Every year, thousands of people visit Costa Rica and wonder the same thing. What if I didn't have to leave? What if this wasn't a vacation? What if this could be home? From relocation and real estate to lifestyle, family, business, and community, this is the Breakthrough to Costa Rica podcast, presented by All in Guanacaste, your guide to life on Costa Rica's Pacific Gold Coast.
Welcome back to the Breakthrough to Costa Rica podcast presented by All in Guanacaste. I'm Rob.
And I'm Jen.
Today we're talking about one of the biggest concerns people have before moving to Costa Rica: healthcare. It doesn't matter whether someone is coming from Canada, the United States, or Europe. At some point, almost everyone asks the same question: what happens if I get sick? And honestly, before we moved here, I just assumed that healthcare would be one of the sacrifices you make when moving to a tropical country. I figured better weather probably came with worse healthcare.
I think a lot of people assume that. They imagine Costa Rica as beaches, surfing, monkeys, and sunsets. Healthcare isn't usually the first thing that comes to mind.
Right? And what surprised me was how many expats I met who actually preferred parts of the healthcare experience here. Not because it's perfect, no healthcare system is, but because it was different in ways they didn't expect.
Especially for Canadians.
We grew up with healthcare being free, but we also grew up with waiting, lots of waiting.
You get referred to somebody who refers you to somebody who schedules an appointment so you can discuss scheduling another appointment.
That's probably the most Canadian thing you've ever said.
I know, but it's true.
And one of the biggest surprises for many people moving to Costa Rica is how quickly they can access care through the private system. One thing that's important to understand is that Costa Rica has both a public and private healthcare system. The public system is called CAHA or CCSS. If you become a resident, you'll typically contribute to the system and have access to it. The public system covers millions of people and has been operating successfully for decades. Now, if you've spent any time researching Costa Rica, you've probably heard mixed opinions about CAHA. Some people love it, some people complain about it. Both perspectives can be true.
Kind of like every healthcare system.
The biggest criticism of the public system is usually wait times for non-emergency procedures and specialist appointments. But if you're coming from Canada, that may not sound particularly shocking. The private system is where many expats spend most of their time. And that's where people often become pleasantly surprised. Private hospitals are modern. Many doctors speak English. Appointments are often available quickly. And the costs are frequently lower than people expect. One thing that catches people off guard is how direct healthcare can be here. You don't always need multiple referrals. You don't always need layers of gatekeepers. Sometimes you simply call the doctor you want to see. That can be refreshing. Another misconception people have is that healthcare must be low quality because Costa Rica is a smaller country. The reality is that Costa Rica has become one of the leading destinations in the world for medical tourism. People fly here specifically for healthcare. Think about that for a moment. People voluntarily board airplanes and travel to Costa Rica for surgeries, dental work, diagnostics, and treatments. That wouldn't happen if the quality wasn't there.
And then they recover near the beach. Another thing worth discussing is cost.
People always want exact numbers, but healthcare costs vary depending on what you're having done. A routine doctor visit is different than surgery. A consultation is different than an MRI. But generally speaking, many expats find private healthcare costs more reasonable than they expected, especially Americans, compared to back home.
Healthcare is one of those subjects where everyone arrives with assumptions, and a lot of those assumptions turn out to be wrong. Now let's talk about emergencies, because that's where people's minds usually go. What if I have a heart attack? What if I'm in a car accident? What if something serious happens?
The reality is that healthcare access depends somewhat on where you live. Living near Liberia is different than living several hours from the nearest major hospital. Living near a larger population center generally means faster access to more services. And that's something people should think about when choosing where to live. Not because healthcare is poor, but because geography matters, the same way it does anywhere.
That's one thing people forget. Costa Rica isn't one giant beach town. Where you live matters a lot.
Exactly. Now here's something interesting. Many expats end up using healthcare less than they expected, not because they stop aging, but because their lifestyle changes. They're outside more, they're walking more, They're spending more time with friends and family. They're often under less stress. And while Costa Rica doesn't magically solve all your problems, it can make healthy habits easier.
I think that's one of the biggest hidden benefits of moving here. You don't necessarily become healthier overnight, but it's easier to build healthier routines.
It's easier to take a walk. It's easier to spend time outside. It's easier to slow down. And sometimes those little things add up. So if healthcare is one of the reasons you've been hesitant about moving to Costa Rica, my advice is simple. Don't assume. Do some research. Talk to people who actually live here. Learn how both systems work. Because many people arrive expecting healthcare to be one of Costa Rica's weaknesses and leave believing it's one of its strengths. Is it perfect? No, but it's often far better than people imagine before they arrive.
And if you're worried about growing older in Costa Rica, just remember, growing older beside the ocean sounds a lot better than growing older in the cold.
Hard to argue with that. Thanks for listening to the Breakthrough to Costa Rica podcast presented by All in Guanacaste. If you're researching relocation, comparing communities, or trying to understand what life actually costs along Costa Rica's Pacific Gold Coast, visit allinguanacaste.com. Until next time,
Stay warm.
or come south.